Hey everyone, it's Jenny at JC Cards, and I'm excited to be joining you today as part of a video hop celebrating the 1 year anniversary of Crafty Meraki. Today I'm going to be showing you in my video how I made this card. It's part of a video hop, so be sure to head on over to the next stop that I've listed in the video description box below, and be sure to comment. There are prizes to be won. More details can be found in the link in my description. So let's get started. I'm using some Arches cold press watercolor cardstock today, and I'm going to be pairing it with this beautiful stamp. It's the You Inspire Me stamp, and it was designed by Deepti Malik, wonderful designer, lovely card maker, and I just love all the images in this set. So I'm going to be stamping all of them. I'm going to be stamping all of them twice. I've cut myself a piece of cardstock that's just under 6 inches wide and I think it's about 8 inches tall. So that way I could cut as many as I thought I needed. I might have spares left over. In the end, I did not. So it's a good job I did it this way. And you'll see I've aligned all my stamps up in the top corner because that way I can just flip the cardstock round and stamp again. I'm going to be heat embossing the flowers, so I'm using a powder tool just to remove any static cling from the watercolor cardstock, and then I'm going to be heat embossing with the rich pale metallic gold embossing powder from Wow. And be sure when using cold pressed watercolor cardstock, one tip, be sure to get your heat gun nice and hot before you do that heat embossing, because it has a tendency to sink into the cardstock. Some are better than others, and I find that if you can get it to melt very quickly with a super hot gun, that sinking sort of doesn't happen as easily. Now to watercolor, I'm going to be using my Altenew Artists 24 pan watercolor set. This is well loved, probably one of my most frequently used watercolor sets, and I really love the brushes. I think you've seen me use them before. I guess designed for Altenew, but these brushes are absolutely brilliant. I usually use silver brush, and these give them a run for their money. I think they're comparable, and they're a great price point. So I like to wet my cardstock first when I'm watercolouring in heat embossed images. So I add some clear water, or as the water gets a little dirtier, it becomes very pale pink, and that's okay because it works for what I'm doing here. And so I drop that clear water in and then drop in my paint. And you'll see that I'm adding it into the corners only. Because this is really good cold press watercolour cardstock, it will wick out as the time goes on, so I don't pull it out too much with my paintbrush. If I need to, I'll just rinse it off. I've got some water off to the side and very gently pull it out, but the watercolor cardstock does a lot of the work for you. And I'll go through and do that. If I want to deepen up those colors, I'll come back in and just add a little bit as it's drying just into those corners, so you can see it adds the contrast. And I'm adding that depth of color where the petals fold over and down into the corners towards the centers. I'm not being too fancy or careful here, and I'm not doing a lot of layering. I've done basically 2 layers, and I've done the same thing with the leaves using a sort of a mix of teal and blue-green colors. This stamp set comes with coordinating dies, and I use some snips just to snip them out. Be careful not to catch your skin on those little sharp pieces, but I always have these snips handy for cutting apart my dies. And then when I store them, I like to grab some magnetic paper because I find that way I don't lose any of those tiny little dies as well, and I keep them inside like a plastic envelope. And then I've die cut them out. I had to run it through twice, but you'll see I actually kept the stamps somewhat far apart on the cardstock, and that way I could put all of the dies through at once without any trouble with the overlaps, and I get these beautiful images. I'm going to be creating a slimline card today, and I thought this new Flirty Wings Meraki Paradise, I love what she's done there, Paradise. So it's a slimline die. It die cuts these tiny little butterflies out from the background. And when you die cut it out, they're really easy to pop out if they haven't already fallen out. The dots don't pop out so easily. You could leave them in. I decided I was going to pop them out, so I used my pokey tool. It took a little bit of time, but I love the look of it. So just really cool die, such a different idea. And I really wanted to use all of those flowers, so I thought slimline, perfect, I can use them all. I actually die cut it from some more cold press cardstock. It wasn't Arches this time because I'm just doing a bit of messy splattering. So I just grabbed some blues and greens and just wet the cardstock completely, added some of those colours in towards the bottom, got a pale layer, heat dried it, added another layer. And you'll see I also added some Sukaneko Gold Shimmer Spritz on both of the layers just to give a really subtle sparkle. You can just see while I'm holding it up there to match that gold embossing powder. Now to attach my cardstock, I didn't want to die cut the die again and pop all those pieces out, so I decided to use foam squares, and as luck would have it, my Scrapbook Adhesives foam squares fit perfectly in each of those spaces, so I added them to the back, get some nice dimension without too much fuss. For my card base, I'm using £110 Nina Solar White cardstock. It's cut to 7.5 inches by 9 inches and scored at 3 3/4. That allows me to just mount my Flirty Wings die cut on the panel itself once I've folded it in half, and I can just trim off any excess, leaving a nice white border around the outside. Now I didn't plan this out ahead of time, so I just popped a bunch of foam squares onto the back of all of my die cuts and played around with how I wanted them to look, and hung them off the edge. Usually I sort of snip off any of the excess, and this time I decided why not, I'm going to leave it. I thought it just looked like this gorgeous floral garden growing up a card, and just couldn't bear to trim off those leaves. And I just really love how this turned out. And I'm so happy that I did all the little die cuts as well, because these were really fun to sort of build out the shape, just popping them in on a couple of layers of foam tape in places just for different levels of dimension, but making sure that you can still see some of those butterflies in and around from the cover plate. Now the sentiment itself from the stamp set, there are several to choose from, but one of them also has a coordinating die in the die set. That's the You Inspire Me. So I stamped that in some permanent pigment black ink and then die cut it out as well, and then mounted it up in the upper middle of my card using some foam squares. And as a finishing touch, I'm using some clear sequins. These are Crater Lake from Catherine Pooler, and I just popped a few of those in places in and around my card. And I like to add them in odd numbers of places. I don't know why. I think it's easier on the eyes. So 3 or 5 places is where I'll typically add sequins. And that finishes my card. So be sure to head on over to the next stop in the video. The link is in the description box below, as well as all the details on the giveaway if you're watching this before the deadline. Happy anniversary, 1 year. Fantastic. I can't believe it's gone so fast. Have a wonderful day. Bye.